It's a bewitching hour, and we're going to call to order the Administrative Committee meeting for November 9th, 2017. The first order of business is to congratulate Judy Mitchell on being reelected yesterday to 4 more years.
Thank you.
Mayor Robles was parked outside my house last night with a shotgun, so I don't know what's going on here. Okay, item number 1, are there any board member concerns? Hearing none, is there any travel to report?
No.
Hearing none, no out of country either.
No, sir.
Wayne, no out of country?
No, I've been only in
Okay.
country.
Okay.
Well, you got,
Is there
Dr.
any
Burke, you've got
questions?
my travel to Sacramento for the board meeting in November. That's
Right,
on the
but I
agenda.
already approved that. I already approved
Okay.
that. And
All
so, have you got anything else, Judy?
No, not now.
Okay.
I'll be going back there in December, but not for now.
No problem. Are there any questions about the December agenda? Hearing no questions, we've received that. There are none. Mr. O'Kelly?
Good morning, Dr. Burke, committee members. This is the report that we provide on a monthly basis to demonstrate that we're making progress on the significant amount of IT projects that are going on at the district. So I'll touch on a few here. The website evaluation improvements. So we're scheduled for final testing next week, and then if everything goes good with the testing, we have a version of the site ready to put out there by the end of next week or the week after. As far as the EGIS project goes, we committed to completing 9 of those projects. 3 of those are already completed this year, and we're anticipating having all 9 done. The permit system automation process, that's going well. I think you've heard through other board items. The dry cleaners, that's up and running right now. It'll be open to the public here the first week of December. The next items are going to be spray booth and gas stations. That's moving forward. We'll have an item you'll hear in probably 15 minutes, an agenda item. We're asking for some money to keep moving forward and finish up a phase 2 and then future phases of the online permit processing. And the last item I'll touch on is the administrative committee wanted an overall IT review, so we hired a third-party contractor. They've done the majority of the work or all of the work at this point. They're putting together their report. So we should have that here in about the next 30 to 45 days. And everything else is moving forward as expected, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that last night I was looking for some information on the website and found it very easily. It was a real pleasure to have that happen. It was a very unusual experience in my history hitting. So tell the new fellow he's obviously moving in the right direction.
So he doesn't get a big head, Dr. Burke? Was it just the homepage you were looking at? I'm kidding. I'm sure he'll take that.
Okay, so we need no motion on that. We'll move to item 8, Mr. O'Kelly.
Dr. Burke, actually, we have an item number 7 is the annual audited financial statements. So this item, just as backup before the auditors start talking, the state law requires that staff prepare annual financial statements for the district in accordance with all the accounting principles. In addition, the federal government requires that there be an audit of all the federal grants that are spent by the district as well. The administrative committee selected auditors about a year ago. They've completed their work, and with that, I will turn it over to Michael DeCastro and Helen Chu. Michael's a managing partner, and Helen's a partner with our CPA firm, and they'll give you a presentation.
Great. Good morning, Chairman Burke, committee members. My name is Michael DeCastro, as Mr. O'Kelly mentioned. To my right is Helen Chu. Helen is the partner over this audit of AQMD. This presentation is a requirement by the standards to communicate to those charged with governance the results of our audit of fiscal year 2017, June 30 ending. And we have a short presentation to provide you, and then we'll take any questions you might have. As mentioned, we did the audit of the financial statements and single audit, which are the federal funds that AQMD receives. We'll go over some financial highlights and go over some required communications that the auditors need to communicate to you.
Thank you.
And then open it up for any questions you might have. We are proud to present to you that our results of our audit for June 30, 2017 provided we call an unmodified or a clean opinion on the basic financial statements of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. The opinion was provided on on activities of governmental activities, business type activities of the district, the blended component unit, which includes the building corp, each of the 5 major funds of the district, and then the aggregate remaining fund, which are other governmental funds that the district has. Prior to us doing our substantive testing of the financial statements and the activities of the district, we also are responsible for assessing the adequacy of internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. A big part of that assessment of controls over financial reporting is reviewing the internal controls over information technology, which drives obviously a lot of the financial transactions. Proud to report that we identified no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies over internal controls. In addition to the audit of the financial statements, we were also responsible for conducting an audit of federal funds received by the South Coast Air Quality Management District. The standards and requirements, we have identified 3 major programs here at the district for 2017, and we provided an unmodified and clean opinion on AQMD's compliance with those federal grant programs. In addition, we also assessed controls over compliance with these programs, and like the financial audit, we identified no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We also provided a clean opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and that's stated in the report. I'd like to briefly go over some financial highlights for the fiscal year. The total assets of the district exceeded its total liabilities by $503 million, and that is termed the net position of the district. The net position increased from the prior year about $120.6 million, due mainly to revenues and long-term emission reduction projects. The governmental funds reported had a combined ending fund balance of $659.9 million, an increase of $119 million from last year, and mainly due again to the above indication of the revenues from long-term emission reduction programs. And program revenues increased by $107 million due to an increase in state grants and federal grants. The general revenue of the district increased by $6.5 million, primarily contributed to an increase in penalties and settlements collected. And then expenses increased by $25.9 million, largely due to higher amounts paid during the year for long-term emission reduction projects compared to the prior year, and also more contracts were completed during 2017. And then in terms of actual revenues to budget, the actual revenues were $5.5 million more than budget due to higher than anticipated penalties and settlements as indicated above. And then expenditure savings were $9.4 million. Savings were attributed primarily to salary savings and prudent purchase decisions during the year. Then lastly, just quickly go over some key requirements for us to communicate to those charged with governance. Our firm, BSA Watson Rice, is responsible to conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, which we did. The audit provides the district with reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the bank's financial statements are free of material misstatement. There were no illegal acts that we identified during the audit. There were no significant or unusual transactions to report as a result of our audit. There were no significant issues discussed with management. There were no disagreements with management on financial accounting and reporting matters. There were no difficulties encountered with management in performing our audit. And lastly, we are independent with respect to the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And then lastly, there were no significant adjustments or transactions that were made as a result of our audit. So with that, open it up for any questions you might have. Thank you.
We couldn't hear
We
you.
can't hear
Dr.
anything, Dr. Burke. There we go.
That was on purpose.
I think that in one of the slides, she had stated that there was no significant expenses for 2000 because of the more projects were completed in 2017. I assume you really meant 2015, 2016. Is that correct?
No, it's 2016 and 17.
Correct. So expenses increased this year compared to last year because of more contracts being completed in this year that we audited compared to last year. Correct. That was correct. It should have been the slide I think you have. I thought that was changed. Would said 15-16, but it is 16-17.
Okay, it should have been said 16, 17.
Correct.
Then.
Correct.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
All right. It was an incorrect one. I just heard that and I saw the difference, and that's why I was.
Correct.
You also stated that there was no management letter directly to the board. Is there any reason why we didn't get a management letter?
Yeah, a management letter is issued if the auditors during the course of the audit identify improvements that can be made in internal controls and processes that we identified during the audit. And the reason why no management letter comment was issued was because we identified no improvements that we suggest that the district adopt. There was nothing that came to our attention during the audit that required a management letter comment.
I'm used to seeing management letters that state the negative as well as the positive when I use the word negative or positive, so that it won't be a question as to whether or not we have your representations that there were none. And that's the reason why I asked. You said I'm on other boards of corporate entities and we get letters when there are none, we get letters if they are. So it's a situation that I think that from the board standpoint of view, I think everyone would, at least I would feel comfortable with knowing that you say there's none to be concerned about.
We could issue one without
Yeah,
any.
we could issue a management letter to the committee and to the board that indicates that we found no improvements, there's no suggestions during our audit, we can definitely do that going forward.
I just got a text from my daughter who asks, if your partner was the managing partner on this account, why didn't she make the presentation?
Who, Helen? Yeah, Helen is the technical partner that, and she refers to me as a managing partner on major clients to give the presentation, but if there's any questions about the audit specifically, she's here to answer them.
If she is the person who did the audit,
Yes.
Yes.
I would suggest in the future she be the person
Sure.
to make the
Sure,
presentation.
absolutely.
Definitely.
She can definitely do that,
Okay,
Dr. Burke, for
thank you
sure.
very much.
You bet.
Because I have to go home and I don't want to be a hashtag a bad chairman thing, okay? Okay, well, thank you very much for your
Mr. Chairman?
presentation. Huh?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a
Yeah.
question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm wondering about the pension liabilities. Could you comment on that?
Councilwoman, I can, these are our financial statements that we prepare, our auditors audit it, but I can tell you the pension liability is at $199 million, up about $50 million from the previous year. It's not unexpected as the pension plan starts to recognize some of the previous year's losses. The plan is still funded, the retirement plan is funded at about 82%, but that pension liability is still continuing to grow and probably will start to level off in the next year or two based on the pension plan's performance last year and their performance in the current year. So the next follow-up question is usually how'd the pension plan perform last year? Last fiscal year, they were about 13.2 or 13.4% investment returns based on their assumption of about 7.5. And I think through the first 4 or 5 months, the first 4 months of this fiscal year, I think they're already up 3 or 4%. So they look like they'll, assuming nothing happens between now and June 30th, that they hit their mark again as well. So we think that'll start to level off, but it's about $200 million liability that's a net liability. Our assets are right in the 700 million range.
In case it doesn't keep going like that, Mike, can you let us know early so we know when to bail?
Yes, Dr. Burke.
Well, it might be good to have a report on this. It might be good to have a report on this at some time, Mike, to explain how you expect that to be resolved or get paid down so that, the board is at least knowledgeable on that subject. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Are there any other questions on this audit? Any other comments?
Not for me.
Okay, then we'll move on to item number 8.
Thanks again, Dr. Burke, committee members. This next item, there's a lot of recommended actions here, but the gist of it is we're requesting authority to appropriate and spend about $740,000 for additional systems development and back office workflow processes, mostly for the online permit processing applications for the going forward phases. So the governing board, as part of this year's general fund budget, set a designation of about $2 million of an additional $2 million to help pay for this continuing online permit application automation. And so what we're doing is coming and asking to spend about $740,000 of that. The contractors that we're using, these are contractors that are pre-qualified through a competitive process, and then the specific funding here is a result of more competition that goes on among those pre-qualified vendors. So this is for us to keep moving forward with the next phases of the online permit processing for new equipment types, back office support, things of that nature. I'll be happy to answer any questions on that item.
I have a question, Mike.
Yes, Dr. Parker.
When we first approved the contractors, was this an amount that we had a resolution internally that said the amount is going to be more than what it is that we have initially started off with?
Sure, Dr. Parker, so
I
what
guess
we
what
do,
my question is, let me get to the
Okay.
bottom line, is that do we have since we're talking about $740,000 and no competitive bid, is this a sole source kind of contract, or are we just kind of continuing on with the contract that we originally approved?
Dr. Parker, it actually is still a competitive bid. So the first step is we come to the admin committee, we say, can we develop a list of vendors who even provide this type of service? So we first compete that out. We look at their technical skills, their hourly charges, things of that nature. And so we create a pool of contractors. And then when we have work like this $740,000, we put the information out to that pool of contractors and say, okay, now bid on that work based on the rates that had already been approved. And then we allocate the funding depending on their strengths, their abilities, and where it makes sense. So this is still considered a competitive process. It's just using a pre-qualified group of vendors.
Okay.
This requires a motion.
It does.
I'll move the item.
Second?
Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Item number 9, Mr. O'Kelly.
Thank you again, Dr. Burke, committee members. This is the last item. This is the second year that we brought this item before the administrative committee. So some background, generally the MOUs and the salary resolutions that the district has with its employees require that there's caps to vacation hours balances. The purpose of that is so that we don't have employees with thousands of hours of vacation on the books, and when they decide to retire, we have to cut a $100,000 check unexpectedly and take a budget hit. Over the last 18 months to 24 months, there's been time requirements for permit backlog reduction, air toxics monitoring, and other somewhat unexpected events, not unexpected, but where it's been more difficult to approve vacation time. And therefore, there are about 100 employees who are over the 360-hour cap. Last year, we asked the governing board through this committee if it would be okay if we did not follow that cap this year. If we followed the cap, we would have to either reduce those employees' balances or they would not accrue further vacation. Again, this is really through no fault of their own, but due to business needs of the district. We would request that this is temporary, again, just for this year. And if this were a necessity next year, we would come back to this committee and the governing board. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Do you expect, now that we're sort of transferring this into the next year, that it will be resolved in the next year? Because is it likely that pushing into the next year means that the year after that we'll have a problem? So I'm just concerned about how it would be resolved in the next year. Are we going to hire more people, or are we going to have a less of a workload? What do we expect?
So, council member, this is Wayne. We actually do expect an increase. You know, with our efforts to look at reclaim, we expect an increase in the number of permit applications. I think that engineering is taking a close look at how we can better allocate the workload amongst what we have now, as well as looking at bringing in additional personnel to address the increased workload. So at this point, we're optimistic that we'll be able to manage it, but there may be a need, depending on how it goes, to come back to you next year for this as well.
Okay. Well, I'll move the item. I don't want to punish our employees for being diligent and doing their jobs even beyond what's called for. So I will move the item.
I'll second. I have a question, Mr.
Okay, you can speak to the item.
I think that one of the concerns that we all would probably look at, and I think that Mr. Kelly and Mr. Nashton, as these people are working, are they having to work overtime in order to do this? Or are they just working just regular straight time?
So, this is Jill Wynot. We do have staff that's doing voluntary overtime, basically one day a week or one day every other week. So we are using some, although Lockie reported, I believe at the last board meeting, that we are under the expected amount of overtime that we would have needed for the permit backlog reduction. So at this point, there are some staff that are voluntarily working some overtime. And I checked with Lockie because as we come into vacations, is he denying vacations? And he said they're not denying vacations, but they're asking people to try and only take 2 weeks if they were thinking of asking for 3 or 4. So they're asking them to try and reduce it where they can. So it's not real draconian at this point for saying no vacations or demanding overtime, but they're able to make their goals so far with voluntary actions by the staff for overtime and reasonable vacation times.
We have a motion and a second on the item. Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes?
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Item number 10.
Good morning, Dr. Burke and members of the committee. Over a month ago, South Coast SCAQMD hosted the Making Sense of Sensors Conference, which covered information regarding the low-cost portable sensors. It included opening remarks by you, Dr. Burke, along with 40 other speakers, which included Dr. Liu, and also an exhibit area, posters, and the tour of the AQ-SPEC laboratory. There were over 350 participants here at the AQMD headquarters from over 8 different countries. It also included 700 online live views of the conference. And I just checked YouTube this morning. The conference was posted online about 2 weeks ago, and it already has over 1,000 views on that media. This action is to recognize revenue of up to $32,000 from the co-sponsors, which include Bay Area, AQMD. CAPCOA was a co-sponsor, but they were directly reimbursing speakers and attendees of the conference. And in your packet, you should have an updated letter which reflects the remaining balance to be used to offset staff costs.
I had trouble finding how much. I understand how much the inflow was, but how much was the expenditure that you need to cover?
So roughly the direct costs, so that includes like costs for the shuttles, conference supplies, etc. The direct costs were about $18,000.
Oh, okay. So did this thing make money?
So this, well, not if you're including staff costs, which is why the recommendation is to offset some of the staff costs. Because the day of the conference, we have about 40 staff who are working it, but then we had a core group of planning staff that devoted a significant amount of time into developing the conference, the logistics as well as the conference material.
I have to tell you, the conference was just amazing. It was amazing. You know, I'm not a big conference person. I don't go to them, and I am glad I was there to see that one. I'll tell you that.
It was great to have you.
I'll take a motion. I'll take a motion on this item.
Move the
I'll
item.
move the item. A second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes?
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, Dr. Fine?
Good morning, Dr. Burke, Dr. Parker. Actually, item number 11, staff is recommending delaying 1 month, and it'll come back to admin committee next month.
Okay, that's fine. Item number 12, Mr. Fine?
Again, good morning, members of the committee. So this item, as the members of the committee know, we have spent considerable time in Washington, D.C., trying to build support for the concept of additional incentives or a clean air fund concept to help to help turn over even the national fleet of heavy-duty equipment to cleaner equipment. And so as part of that campaign in DC and meeting with legislatures and the executive branch and EPA, it became clear that in order to make the case for this campaign, that we needed some background data on the economic benefits of those types of clean technology investments. So this item is to embark upon that economic study, working with ICF, a consulting company that does this type of work for many different clients across the country. The total cost of the contract is $230,000, but we have Bay Area SCAQMD has agreed to contribute $100,000 of that cost, and we're continuing to work with other districts and other entities to help offset the total cost. So this item is just to authorize that contract it's a sole source contract with ICF to conduct that economic study.
Pleasure of the committee.
I have a question. Have we asked San Joaquin Valley Air District to contribute?
Yes, council member, this is Wayne again. So Syed has actually committed to fund up to $30,000. That's within his authority. He wanted to go to his board to try to get additional level of funding to be more commensurate with what Bay Area is putting in and what we're putting in. I think the fact that we have the 3 largest air districts in California working together to fund this, and as Dr. Fine said, not only will it help us in our attempt to get additional funding through the Congress and through the executive branch, but it'll also help support EPA as it moves forward, as we hope it moves forward in the rulemaking process for the heavy-duty ultra-low NOx program. So we see multiple benefits for the study, and we're continuing to try to get additional sources of funding to help offset our costs.
And are we able to get some other states to join us in this effort?
Well,
it seems like, if we can get California with some other states, we'll have a bigger punch.
Yes, so we can approach NESCOM, and NESCOM has expressed some interest in that, so we will definitely continue to do so to look for those fundings to help offset the cost. We are getting some additional contributions from in-kind. We've talked with some of the other manufacturers. Our concern with some of the engine manufacturers and like the Natural Gas Coalition was that with the perception, if they put in funding, would be that industry is buying this study. If we keep it to like the states and the others, we think it's a pretty clean study and will help increase the validity and seriousness by which it's considered.
Okay. I'll move the item.
Second.
The clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Okay, item 13, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Dr. Burke, committee members. The last time this item was before the committee in September, you directed me to work on 3 areas in the board procedures with Board Member Mitchell, which I've done. The first area was the deadline for submitting speaker cards. And the issue here was whether the deadline should be before the board takes up an item or whether the deadline should be prior to the close of public comment. The recommendation here is to put the deadline at the time before the board takes up an item, but to provide that the chairman has discretion to allow late submission of cards for good cause. The second issue concerns public comment by group spokespersons. The committee asks that the language in the procedures clarify that group spokespersons are given additional time to speak in lieu of having individual speakers take less time to speak. And finally, the committee asks that language be added to the provision concerning disruptions to clarify that disobeying a lawful directive of the chair constituted a disruption. And I think with having addressed those three issues, all the issues that the board members and the public have raised have been addressed.
All right.
I have one question, Kurt, and I agree with everything that you said except the last one. And when you say disagreeing with a lawful directive of the chair, you're the lawyer, and that's why I'm asking you. Is someone going to say that, as you know, we've had in the paper today what our interpretation of rules and regulations and laws are? What is lawful? Is that going to be ambiguous to the extent that someone would challenge that as to what it is that say?
At the moment. At that moment.
At that particular moment.
Yeah.
Dr. Parker, I misspoke if I said disagreeing with the chair, which it's disobeying a lawful directive of the chair. So if the chairman directs that speaker's time is over and the speaker continues and the speaker's admonished, then the procedures make it clear that that's a disruption.
Okay.
Pleasure of the committee.
I'll move the item.
I would make a motion to approve the staff recommendation and adopt these changes.
Okay, we have a motion by Judy Mitchell, a second by Dr. Parker. Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Mitchell? Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes, I didn't hear Nancy, but yes.
Dr. Parker?
I didn't hear Nancy either, so.
Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Next item.
Okay, Mr. Gilchrist.
The next one's mine, Dr. Burke, item 14.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kurt, I skipped over your second item.
And we need the money, Dr. Burke. This item is to approve an additional.
I don't want anybody to think I did that intentionally.
An additional $350,000 to pay outside counsel for environmental litigation. This is principally Exide, Tesoro, and the reclaim litigation.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Mr. Alatorre, we don't need, oh, no, Gilchrist?
Did I miss my turn, Dr. Burke?
Almost, but not quite.
We, staff is recommending that we pull this item and bring it back to the December admin committee.
Okay, fine. See, you could have missed your turn and nothing would have been hurt.
That's true.
Okay, Mr. Alatorre?
Good morning, Dr. Burke and committee members. Our current contract with the state legislative representation in Sacramento expires at the end of this year. Back in 2017, governing board approved a release of RFP for proposals for legislative representation in Sacramento. In response to this RFP, we only received 2 proposals, and they are both from our current representatives of the Sacramento, Gonzalez Quintana Hunter, LLC, and Joe Gonzalez and Son. Given that staff and the governing board members are already familiar with these firms based on the years of their prior service for the district, and because only 2 proposals were received, both proposals were referred to this committee for consideration. Both firms have played a pivotal role in a very successful year in Sacramento. Primarily, this includes securing passage of 2 of our bills, AB 1132 by Assemblymember Garcia and AB 1274 by Assemblymember O'Donnell. And additionally, they facilitated access to over $100 million in air funding for South Coast region, as well as potentially hundreds of millions of dollars more in grant applications. Staff recommends approval of this item.
I think that saying that their performance last year was successful is the understatement of the year. I was just totally amazed and pleased, as I'm sure my colleagues were, of the performance of them and yourself and our executive director in that effort. It was just absolutely amazing, and all of you are to be congratulated on this. I'll accept a motion on this item.
I'll move the item.
I'll move the item.
Okay. Second. Well, we have a motion and a second by Dr. Parker. How's that? And so we'll call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Parker,
Yes.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
And item 17 is just the submittal, right, Mr. Salvatore?
Yes, sir.
Any other business before this committee?
Dr. Burke, this
Any
is,
public?
Dr. Burke.
I'm sorry?
With regards to other business, we just wanted to make an announcement and present to you a new hire that we recently did. I'm going to ask Dr. Fine to introduce Sarah Reese.
Okay.
Yeah, so a new addition to the executive team at the district began work this week. Dr. Sarah Reese is our new Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in our Planning and Rules Division. We're very happy to have her. Maybe she can say a couple words about her background as way of introduction.
Sure, and I'm very excited to be here. It's great to be back on the West Coast. So I came here from EPA. I was with the EPA's headquarters office in their Office of Policy. I directed the Office of Regulatory Policy and Management there. That's the office that does all of regulatory review within EPA, as well as all of the interaction and negotiation with the White House during review of regulations. Before that, I was with the state of Washington. I ran their rules and policy shop for their air program for several years. I have a background in chemical engineering. I also practiced law in the Bay Area for several years, and I have a PhD in engineering and public policy. It's great to be here.
Welcome aboard, and we look forward to your involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other business before the administrative committee? Any public comment there in CCA?
None here, Dr. Burke.
There's no public comment here in the Lux. Is there anybody there that we can't see with you, Ms. Mitchell?
No, no one is here.
You're sure of that?
Let me check. I don't see it.
Okay. Based on that, we will adjourn the administrative committee meeting until December of this year.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah.